To understand why Donald Trump is unfit for office, understand why Trump is a danger to the Republic, you must understand that he is a malignant narcissist.
Malignant narcissists exhibit a grandiose sense of self-importance, derive pleasure from causing harm, and are incapable of caring about other people's feelings.
This explains Donald Trump's pathological lying, his misogyny, his admiration for dictators, and his criminal behavior.
Trump is incapable of caring about you, our country, and the Constitution that a president swears to faithfully execute. He's only capable of caring about himself.
That is why Donald Trump is unfit for office.
This is why he's a danger to the Republic.
Donald Trump has no choice but to be a malignant narcissist.
But we have the choice.
We can choose
whether or not to put a malignant narcissist in the White House again.
Go to psychopac.org to read the letter from 225 mental health professionals on Trump's dangerous psychopathology.
America honors its veterans. In war or peacetime, their loss deserves honor, respect, and dignity.
According to this report, Trump was furious, telling his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, quote, "It doesn't cost $60,000 to bury an effing Mexican."
This is who Donald Trump is. This is what he said about a dead American soldier. Disrespect, insults, contempt for the people he calls suckers and losers. That's the real Donald Trump. And that's un-American.
I was pretty much undecided in this race till I heard Donald Trump talking about Arnold Palmer's penis. Now I'm a Trump guy.
He took showers with the other pros. They came out of there, they said, oh my God.
I wasn't going to vote for Donald Trump until he freaked out at a rally and spent 40 minutes just swaying to music.
I decided to vote for Trump when he talked about the crowd reaction to his debate.
And they corrected me everything I said practically. And I think 9 times or 11 times. And the audience was absolutely, they went crazy.
When I heard his warning about sharks, that was it. I'm going with Trump.
But you know what I'd do if there was a shark or you get electrocuted? I'll take electrocution every single time.
He's a stable genius.
Bad news, bad things are happening. I'm sorry.
Donald Trump. Because we want a guy in his 80s who talks about Arnold Palmer's penis, sharks, and whatever the hell he's trying to say.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured.
I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break.
She was always of Indian heritage until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black. I have concepts of a plan. They take your child, it was a he, and comes back a she. For 54 years, they were trying to get Roe v. Wade terminated, and I did it. There has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah. We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. We're like a garbage can for the world. That's what's happened. That's what's happened to her. We're like a garbage can.
Trump's dark, sinister closing message to the nation. Not that we're a shining city on the hill, but that America is
running to be an American tyrant.
You already know what time it is. That we don't have a moment to lose. We want to stop that other guy. I don't call him by his name. I call him Agent Orange.
We've seen that horror show before. And there's no way, no how we gonna make America great again. We are not going back.
You want to hear something about an American dream? Fort McPherson was once a Confederate army base where there were Confederate soldiers trying to plot and plan on how to keep 3.9 million Negroes enslaved. Now that land is owned by me.
Boom. Boom. That Last Bite by Tyler Perry is about as good a depiction of the American dream as you are going to get. Perry, one of Georgia's most important residents, I suspect, even to that state's Republican governor, has survived poverty, even living in his car at one point, to become an actor, comedian, producer, and filmmaker who a few years ago was able to buy that 230-acre former Confederate military base and turn it into the biggest, most important movie studio in the eastern U.S., making Atlanta the Hollywood of the East Coast. Bruce Springsteen's father was a day laborer in Freehold, New Jersey. Yet his working-class son became one of the most important singer-songwriters in the history of the music industry, who has maintained his authenticity by repping the heart of blue-collar America for decades. Spike Lee's father was a jazz musician. He grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and attended historically black Morehouse College. He's one of America's most important filmmakers. His movies have illuminated everything from HBCU life to the killing of black men and racial incidents in New York to the life of Malcolm X. Samuel L. Jackson was born 2 years after Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. But unlike Trump, who was born rich, Jackson's grandparents were from Chattanooga, Tennessee. He was a young activist in the Black Power movement in the 1960s and is also a Morehouse man. He moved to New York City and became a prolific stage actor who even survived drug addiction to become one of the biggest, most badass and iconic stars in the world. And then, of course, there's Barack Obama, a man who also came from humble roots. An African immigrant father and white mom from Kansas, raised largely by his grandparents in Hawaii. But through his brains and determination, he made it to the top of the Harvard Law Review, to the Senate, and then to becoming the first black president of the United States. Kamala Harris herself is the daughter of immigrants from Jamaica and India, who also went to an HBCU, Howard University, and won an improbable race to become the San Francisco DA, then another to become the first black Attorney General of California, then a U.S. Senator, and then the first woman Vice President of the United States. And now she's the Democratic nominee to be the President of the United States.
You here understand we have an opportunity before us to turn the page on the fear and divisiveness that have characterized our politics for a decade because of Donald Trump. We have the opportunity to turn the page and chart a new way and a joyful way forward.
This group of Americans, descendants of slaves, sons of the working class, a daughter of the middle class, none coming from money or from the ranks of the elite, all of whom achieved the American dream. If you want to know why people all over the world want to come here to this country and have looked up to America, that's why. It's the possibilities and the opportunities this country uniquely offers despite the challenges of being a multiracial democracy. That's why my parents immigrated here. And yet, here again is Donald Trump's closing argument about America.
They're coming from 181 countries as of yesterday. Right, and we're a dumping ground. We're like a garbage can for the world. That's what's happened. That's what's happened to. We're like a garbage can. First time I've ever said garbage can, but you know what? It's a very accurate description.
A garbage can. Donald Trump describes America, a country that has given him more than he deserved, including a presidency he had zero qualifications for, as a garbage can. Donald Trump's grandfather, Friedrich Drumpf, came to this country from Bavaria, aka Germany, in 1885 as a 16-year-old draft dodger. He bought the one-way steamship ticket in order to avoid compulsory military service in his home country. That is an example that his grandson, Cadet Bone Spurs, would later follow to keep from serving in Vietnam. Among the jobs the teenage coward wound up doing here in America were working as a barber and allegedly as a pimp, running a saloon where he rented female prostitutes to gold prospectors, since he had failed as a gold prospector himself. He eventually invested in real estate in New York, married a fellow German, and tried to go home. But Germany stripped him of his citizenship for draft dodging, and he returned to the U.S. for good. Lucky us. His middle child, Fred, was Donald Trump's father. Fred inherited New York properties from his father and built his real estate empire by becoming a slumlord in Queens, New York, taking advantage of generous tax incentives while also being a prolific tax evader, best known for buying up and ruining Coney Island. He used to lie about his German heritage, pretending to be Swedish so he could do business with Jewish New Yorkers while getting sued by the Nixon administration for refusing to rent apartments to black New Yorkers. Donald Trump's mother, born Marianne McLeod, was an immigrant too, from Scotland. She was working as a maid when she met Fred, but pretty soon, with Fred on her arm, she was sporting fur coats and jewels, while refusing to let her own nieces and nephews have free access to the coin laundry in the buildings the Trumps let them live in, and sometimes withholding heat, according to her niece, Mary Trump. And then there's Donald, a man who was born with $317 million in the bank, who, after Fred helped him get into UPenn and then handed over his real estate empire, promptly lost $900 million on bad real estate and casino investments. He was saved by Russian money, and then by Mark Burnett, when he was dead broke, but a good enough performer to land a job as the star of The Apprentice on NBC. And that fame, despite his having no actual skills, convinced enough Americans that he should be president that he defeated a former First Lady, U.S. Senator, and Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, despite losing the popular vote by 3 million votes. He and his family have done nothing but grift off this country. They stole and took and have given nothing back. Trump and his adult sons are banned from doing business in the state of New York for committing charities fraud. They didn't pay taxes and scammed the state to the point where Trump now owes the state of New York nearly $500 million. Donald Trump has a lot of effing nerve calling this country, a country that has given him every undeserved benefit a mediocre, garish, tacky, creepy sex pest, whiner, and felon could possibly imagine. A garbage can because of immigrants who, unlike his cynical, sociopathic immigrant family, have actually given this country something in return. Joining me now is Tim O'Brien, Senior Executive Editor of Bloomberg Opinion, and Democratic pollster Fernand Amandi. Thank you both for being here. And Tim, if I missed something great that the Trumps have contributed to America, you are a biographer of Donald Trump. Please fill us in.
Well, I actually want to point out that also he had 2 wives who were immigrants in that list of, immigrant connections to the world of Donald Trump. If anyone had told him that his 2 of his wives were infecting the country or were vermin or were garbage cans, he obviously would have been insulted and he would have taken strong action against those people. But he has no trouble getting up on a national stage as a Republican candidate in a party that at one point said it wanted to embrace tolerance and expand the Republican net to include more people of color and more immigrants in the party. To completely redefine it in the most ugly, sensationalistic, and damaging of terms. And he's a man who also made his bones professionally and politically in the city of New York, which is not a perfect city. It's got its warts, but if there's any city on the planet that has tried to make tolerance, diversity, and a melting pot work, it's New York. And he self-identifies as a New Yorker. And it's one of the reasons New York has disowned him, is because at his core, he is a profound racist, and he doesn't hesitate to try to insinuate that the country would be better off if it had less diversity and if migrants went somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't mind, Fernand, his own late wife and his third wife, Melania, being immigrants because they're not from the Congo, Venezuela, or Haiti, one of the countries he considers S-hole countries. They're from white countries that he thinks are fine to come here. But I mean, you and I both have parents who are immigrants. I woke up pretty hopping mad when I heard that quote. I wonder how it struck you.
Joy, it's something for the worst American who's ever lived, in Donald Trump, to call me and you, the sons and the daughters and the grandsons and the granddaughters of garbage people, when he is everything wrong with the worst of what this country represents. Such a phenomenal, extraordinary country. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people that think like Donald Trump, and we can't allow these distraction words and these horrible concepts to impede on our eyes on the ultimate prize, which is 270 electoral votes on November 5th for Kamala Harris. Joy, I am, in a sense, though, grateful to Donald Trump, because I was worried about a year ago that he was going to try the BS approach in this campaign and talk about unity and all of this, stuff, cover stuff, if you will. Instead, he has absolutely kept the mask that he's had off for the last 8 years even more off, gone full-on fascist, full-on racist, full-on white supremacist, full-on misogynist. And I think we now have to all internalize, all of us watching this broadcast tonight, the election is not about Kamala Harris or Donald Trump anymore. It's about whether or not we as Americans are going to allow Donald Trump's vision for this country and for the people that make this country great, Joy, which are your parents, my parents and grandparents, and all of those here that emigrated to this country to make the United States and live the American dream. That's the question. Are we going to allow that to happen? Because we're not going back, Joy. I'm not going back, and you're not going back.
Amen to that. Amen to that. And Tim, I mean, we are starting to see, and I think it is heartening. I had the conversation with Claire McCaskill last night, and she definitely gave a very good, loving correction on it isn't all Republicans that are going along with this garbage. You're starting to see a sort of what happened when the John Birch Society was evicted from the Republican Party in the late 1970s and going into the 1980s, when the Ronald Reagan crew kicked them out and said, you can't be here. You go home. You don't have to go home, but you got to get the hell out of here. You've got former Wisconsin Republicans backing Kamala Harris. You've got the former mayor in reliably red Waukesha, Wisconsin, endorsing her. You've got the Green Bay, Wisconsin, a Republican from Green Bay, Wisconsin, has endorsed her, calling Trump a totalitarian and a fascist. You've got former aides to John Kelly coming forward and defending him now that he's gone on record and allowed a tape to come out with him calling Donald Trump a Nazi fan and obviously a person who would try to rule as a fascist. You are starting to see some Republicans join the Liz Cheney coalition and say, no more, we want this out of our party. That's a good sign, right?
Of course it's a good sign, because I don't think we're going to solve the things that divide us by dividing ourselves further. I do wish it hadn't happened, a week before the election. I wish people had started to organize and take action around what a plague and a problem Donald Trump is long before now. But I think the reality is you can't deny any longer what Trump intends to do if he becomes president and what he stands for as a candidate. It is the idea, Mitch McConnell came out today saying that it's wrong of the Democrats and a handful of Republicans now to call Donald Trump a fascist, that it makes him a target and subjects him to violence, when Trump has been targeting people with sensationalist, dangerous language his entire career with no concern about their safety. And moreover, the Republicans have used a whole alphabet soup of acronyms and phrases to either demonize or isolate their opponents, from, woke to fake news to DEI, go on down the list. The reality around fascist is that Trump is a walking definition of what a fascist wants to do. He wants to weaponize the military. He wants to take control of the economy. He wants to build a government that is based on cultism and the power of his own character. And he'll try to do that from day one in the White House. And it's a clear and present danger. And the Republican Party now recognizes it, and so do some members of the military.
And you're seeing, to add to that, Fernand, you're starting to see Republicans toy with the idea in a state you have a connection to, North Carolina, that we should just skip the election thing and just go ahead and award Donald Trump the votes in the state of North Carolina. He said that on a far right-wing podcast. You're seeing Republicans talking about just taking the election to the courts and not having the voters rule. I mean, they are not only looking the other way when he says fascist things like round people up and put them in camps and mass deportation and round up all of his enemies and arrest them. They just shrug their shoulders and say there's nothing wrong with it. So the Republicans who are still on Team Trump are apparently fascist enablers.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, these are complicit fascist enablers. And Joy, unfortunately, there is precedent around the world for this type of behavior. We saw it in Nazi Germany. We saw it in Russia now as a whole crew of people have turned over and become Putin enablers. We saw it in my parents' home country of Cuba, where as Castro rose to power and became more and more authoritarian, they started to line up and normalize and justify his bankrupt regime, which now is, by the way, completely in the dark, 60 years of repressive authoritarianism. I always tell folks, the problem with democracy is if you lose it, you don't always get it back, and certainly not in your lifetime. So, Joe, I think, again, we need to think about the stakes here. What is at play? And if you're anxious, if you have, feelings of dread, channel that this weekend and next week, getting into those battleground states, calling folks in the key states, doing what you can, and also calling out the shameful conduct of our institutions, which are bowing to this fascism. And I'm talking about the Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post, which were disgraceful. You are a disgrace to what you did and the message you sent to our country with your cowardly refusal to endorse someone who defends democracy and silently are as complicit as the Republicans who bow behind Trump's fascism. Shame on you.
And say their names, because according to folks at the Washington Post, including some have resigned, that was Jeff Bezos' decision himself. Capitulating in advance is a part of how you build a fascist country, is that you have billionaires like that who fear a false billionaire who says he wants to rule like Hitler with an army like Hitler's. Indeed. Thank you for saying that, because I was going to say it, but Fernand said it better than I did.
Her blanket.
First of all, I'm the one that got rid of Roe v. Wade.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion?
There has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form. Women will be happy, healthy, confident, and free. You will no longer be thinking about abortion. So all they talk about abortion. You will no longer be abandoned, lonely, or scared. You will no longer have anxiety. You will be protected, and I will be your protector.
Sherilyn, to juxtapose that woman's story with the sound of Trump praising his decision to appoint Supreme Court justices who would end a woman's right to choose is powerful stuff. What's your reaction to it?
You might love Kamala Harris and everything she stands for. Or you might only like Kamala Harris and some of what she stands for. Or maybe you're undecided, feel you don't know enough about her. So then, what do you know about her? A lot. You know she doesn't spew hate and anger. You know she doesn't bully, that she doesn't promise to lock up anyone who disagrees with her. She doesn't spread the big lie about our elections. You know she isn't a threat to our freedom, our democracy, and our children's futures. You also know a lot about Donald Trump. You know that everything she wouldn't do, he would, and has.
Donald Trump fights for billionaires and large corporations. I will fight to give money back to working and middle-class Americans.
You know who he is, and you know who she isn't. This November, decide who you are.